want to say I appreciate you, Dan, for coming on this episode for a second week in a row. I know we had a lot of takes and a lot of storylines heading into this divisional round weekend for the NFL. How have you been? How's your week been going? Anything new with you going on?
Oh man, it's just great to be here. I'm honored to be a guest. Caught those games, man, and took some notes. So I'm ready to dive in today.
We'll go ahead and dive in. The first game of the week saw the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans. And I think it was a game that a lot of people believe the Ravens should have won in the fashion that they did. But I'd be lying to you if I said there wasn't a part of me that honestly thought that CJ Stroud and the Texans were going to somehow pull off like an upset. But heading into it, how did you feel about the Texans' chance against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens?
Listen, all fairy tales have to come to an end, whether that be a happy ending or a bad ending. I think this was a great experience for CJ Stroud. And what I mean by that is him losing prepares him for the future. You could always learn a lot from losing. Um, and it definitely wasn't his year. There was no way that a rookie was going to be able to beat a veteran, a seasoned veteran at that, having an MVP season with finally a good team on both ends. I think the Texans had a good run. I think, this shows that, okay, they have the chance to be contenders with a good leader. That's what this game highlighted most, was that the Texans got there. In my mind, I didn't think they were going to stand a chance. But the fact that they made it that far was a testament to his skill. And I think he'll be a great quarterback for years to come. Not everyone has the Brady story where they can just step in and win. I think we expect that now in football after seeing guys like, your Brady's or the backup stories like Nick Foles. Like, that's just not going to happen. It's not a rare occurrence. We know Brady by his name because he's Brady, not because there's a million of them. So I really thought, and I think C.J. Stroud is a great quarterback. He's shown he has great arm maturity, and what I mean by that is he's not throwing too many picks. He's only making the reads that he can make. He makes beautiful throws. He's accurate, mobile. He can do it all. He has a good pocket presence, but I just didn't think they were going to stand a chance against, the reigning, who we all know is going to be an MVP. He's in his prime, and his team is, like I said, finally good on both ends.
And I'm glad you brought up a point about Lamar Jackson. I have a quick take on C.J. Stroud. I know we talked about him off air and throughout the week. I think just in the previous week and during Wild Card Weekend, he just seemed so poised. You would have never guessed that he was a rookie. Coming out of the draft, obviously everyone was hyping up Bryce Young, and he was supposed to be touted as the next big thing. And granted, maybe it's because of the scenario and the environment that Bryce Young is currently in, because as we know, Carolina Panthers are not an organization that's really on the come up. I think CJ Stroud is definitely in a better scenario, a better environment, especially with a young defensive-minded coach like DeMeco Ryan, who came out of the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, where they pride themselves in establishing the run and a dominant defense, which can only fare well for a young quarterback like a CJ Stroud. I think, like you said, he has that arm maturity, but he also has that mental toughness that I think will help him throughout the course of his career. And if this is what he's showing us in his first season, let alone bringing the Houston Texans to the postseason, actually winning the division in his first season as a starter, I think that's impressive as it is, especially given how they were supposed to be in a rebuilding year after losing, or not even losing, but trading away Deshaun Watson and kind of getting fleeced for all these draft picks, which in hindsight, I think the Houston Texans won that trade. As you can see, Deshaun Watson didn't even complete his year with the Cleveland Browns. I think,
Yeah.
I think as you mentioned, C.J. Stroud. Well, I mean, because it's like in hindsight, yeah, you can say like it didn't work out for him, but in the moment, yeah, everyone was touting the Cleveland Browns as a serious threat. Now, granted, they made the playoffs, but with Joe Flacco, I mean, you saw how that turned out. They didn't even show off the bus. They didn't even come off the game.
Yeah, yeah. And with that being said, like you said, they made it to the playoffs after being, a drought-stricken team for success. I mean, they have been historically asked. Let's be real. Texans have been historically asked. They've had some standout players, but No one has thought in recent years. I'm talking even with prime J.J. Watt.
Hmm.
Nobody's thinking this team is going to the Super Bowl. So I mean, the fact that he's even able to get them this, have a winning season as a rookie to an organization that's not good. And I can't even say that anymore because they showed that obviously they made the right picks this year and last year to put him in this position. Um, Going back to Bryce Young's, I don't believe that there are some organizations in sports that no matter who they get, they're just not going to get it done. You could have the best player and still not win anything. And that's just, to me, reflects more on the organization and less on the player. I do think he's going to be a great quarterback. I just think he's not at the right team. Like Ben Roethlisberger had to go to the Steelers. You know what I mean? You have to be on the right team. You're not going to win with certain people. Drew Brees had to go to the Saints. You're not going to win with certain organizations simply because that organization doesn't have what it takes, whether that be in the front office, whether that be on the coaching staff, or players. It's not going to happen at some organizations. Because when you think about it, I mean, how many teams have won? How do you know how many teams have won Super Bowls in the NFL? I'm not too sure.
Well, I know for a fact four of them haven't, so I want to say at least over 25 off the top of my head because I know like Jacksonville, the Texans they haven't, the Cardinals haven't for sure because they haven't accomplished anything in the last 100 years. And
See,
I desperately hope that everybody like at work who's a Cardinal fan or claims to be a Cardinal fan knows that they're the oldest team in the NFL and they have nothing to show for it.
that is crazy. Now I'm looking at this. It says 20 teams have won a Super Bowl.
Okay.
Um, and 15 hold multiple titles. So just to put that in perspective, if the football has been around for 100 years and only 15 teams have repeated, that means the other 17, will never win again. Basically, is what I'm saying. It's only a select organizations. You got your, teams like the 49ers who have dominated eras and generations. You got teams like the Steelers who have dominated. You got teams like, you could throw the Ravens in there that have multiple championships.
Sure.
Cowboys, obviously, big one.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you just are not expecting the Panthers to get anything done. And I'm pretty sure the Panthers are one of those teams who haven't won. So,
Yeah.
I'm not expecting Bryce Young to really do much until he leaves.
Yeah, and I think what it really comes down to is developing that culture because, like you mentioned, the teams like the Steelers, like the Niners, like the Cowboys, they weren't always perennial winners, but over time they had to develop that culture and that championship mentality that would mold them into what they are now. Now they have that expectation of championships, but I guarantee you, back in 1981, when the Niners were, having Bill Walsh as a third-year head coach, Joe Montana as a third-year quarterback, they didn't have anything to go off of. They didn't have that expectation. They were building it as they go. So that's what I see with Houston. I see this as their opportunity to develop a culture under DeMeco Ryans and change the fortune of their organization. And the same could be said with Carolina. They just haven't found the right pieces. I'm not saying Bryce Young is going to be the next Joe Montana, but who are we to say that maybe he's not that quarterback to help change their ways? It was his rookie year. And as we know, Peyton Manning was a rookie, and he had the record for most interceptions as a rookie. So you can't judge him by that first year. This is the baseline. This is what we're working with. But I do agree with your take that it has a lot to do with the organization and how they're able to form coaching, how they're able to form a play style, and again, most importantly, the culture that they're setting in terms of their expectations moving forward.
For sure. And I mean, if they couldn't get it done with MVP Cam, that says a lot. Because I believe Cam is what Josh Allen is. I mean, prime Cam, is shown that he has the same abilities that we hold Josh Allen in high regards. Prime Cam was that guy. And they couldn't get it done, having the best regular season record that year. I think it definitely reflects the organization and definitely how they dealt with him after that. It feels like after that they kind of gave up on him. And unfortunately, which I think also adds to, like we said, the organization's makeup and the way they treat their players. So I'm just hoping Bryce Young has a great career. And like you said, it's his rookie year. But yes, I don't believe he will be, as far as like Super Bowls. I don't think he wins a ring with the Panthers. I just don't see that.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're wrong for thinking that, especially given the current state of that franchise. But you did talk about Josh Allen, and I want to stay inside the AFC. What is your take on Josh Allen's performance against the Kansas City Chiefs? Because heading into this game, he is 0-2 against the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs. Now, granted, those first two games were in Arrowhead in Kansas City. This was his first opportunity to host the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs and finally get over the hump. Unfortunately, they weren't able to do that. What do you think Josh Allen's mindset or the organization itself's mindset is, knowing that they still weren't able to defeat the Kansas City Chiefs?
Listen, man, I think people have to cut Josh Allen some slack. I mean, I seen the memes flood in immediately. But listen, Josh Allen is a guy that went out there and he kept them in the game. At one point, had the lead. So, I mean, yes, he's at home, and we're talking about different weathers here. But Kansas City is not a hot place. So it's like, I mean, they're both going to get frigid temperatures. They're both going to see, large crowds. At the end of the day, I feel like we're depending on the weather too much. Where as fans, these are professionals. They've played in every weather because they were in college, meaning they had to go to different states and conferences and all different types of weather. So they've done it all. There's no excuse whether it was snowing, raining, hail, shit, if the field was on fire. So um, I believe that, yes, he had the home field advantage. He technically had the weather advantage. That really wasn't an advantage because when you're going against a Hall of Famer, the outside noise doesn't matter. What happens and what matters is what happens on between those lines on the field. So I think he had an exceptional game. A lot of people will fault him for the last play, not throwing it to Diggs. But, I mean, look at Diggs the entire game. That nigga was dropping passes. He dropped a simple over-the-shoulder. I mean, jumped into it, which is like, I mean, when I was playing flag football at third grade, the coach tells you not to jump into balls unless you have to, pause. This dude jumped into it for no reason and then dropped it. So, I mean, he was getting locked up pretty much the whole game. He was being doubled. They had a specific guy, I think it was the safety, was watching him from afar. So he would run a route. Maybe he does a quick slant. He gets away from his corner. There's a safety hovering over him. Because let's be real, Diggs is the real offensive weapon that Josh Allen can throw. The most known and highly touted weapon that he has.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're going to expect that's the guy that's going to be targeted. So I think he did what he should, because the guy in the end zone was also open as well. He just couldn't make the throw how he wanted to, and that happens. It was unfortunate the way the game ended. I do believe there's other decisions that led to them losing, but Josh Allen played exceptional. I mean, I think he showed off that mobility, his size, the grit, because he was taking some mean hits. I've never seen that many lateral passes in a game before. I mean, he had about two or three. And was just able to go in there on aggressive mode. How would you rate his performance?
I'm really glad you brought up his aggressiveness in the game because, like you mentioned, there was quite a few lateral plays. It looked like he was trying to take a playbook out of Patrick Mahomes because there were times where he was throwing a little bit of a side throw and, again, kind of playing trickery with his game and trying to keep them on their toes, which I think is a smart thing to do, especially against this year's Kansas City Chiefs, who have prided themselves in a defense. Throughout the regular season, they kind of struggled offensively. A lot of that had to do with their receivers dropping balls. And realizing, and you and I talked about this heading into the game, the key for Buffalo was to control the tempo and to control the clock, to keep Mahomes and that offense off the field. And I thought they did a pretty good job at that. The only thing that they kind of struggled with, like you mentioned, was the receivers like Diggs not really performing. I might be wrong. I believe he had 3 or 4 receptions for the game. And going back to that last throw where you were saying how he didn't throw it underneath to Diggs, because this is something I brought up as well. I personally felt, of course, if he hits that deep pass for the touchdown, all this is erased, and, we're not talking about them losing. But if I'm in that position, I don't know if you're trying to be overly aggressive because they were coming out of the 2 minute warning and you want to score right off the bat, giving Kansas City 2 minutes with that ball. I think the better read was to dish it out to Diggs because he will go underneath. You can keep the clock running. Again, you're still working at your own pace. And if you're not able to score that touchdown, you can settle for the field goal, go to overtime. Because if you give that touchdown right there at 2 minutes, because they were coming out of the 2 minute warning, you're giving Patrick Mahomes 2 minutes to score and essentially put the game away. I think, again, in the hindsight, being 2020, that's where you go. And like you said, Diggs was dropping passes. But if he drops the pass, what would they have been? It would have been like 4th and 5, I believe it was, right?
Yeah.
Something around there. They settled for the field goal, or like you and I mentioned, it's only 5 yards. In the first quarter, they were going for it on 4th down. What stopped them from going for it right then and there in that play? I'm a fan of their coach, Sean McDermott. I do think they, like you mentioned earlier when we spoke on the phone, some of their play calling was a little bit unbalanced and it didn't really make sense. In the first half, you're going for it and you're being aggressive, and now in the fourth quarter, you're taking your foot off the gas. And you saw what happened with Bass. He shanked the kick, and you did mention that. I will give you credit for that, Dan. Off of some of his kicks, it seemed uneven. We weren't comfortable with seeing how he was kicking, and it came down to that. They had an opportunity to tie it for overtime, and that wasn't the case.
And it's funny that we, like you said, if he throws it to Diggs and he drops it, they still got that 4th and 5. But they're still going to go for that field goal and miss. At this point, I'm not trying to tie with Kansas City because it's clear that they're not confident with the ability of stopping Mahomes, which is why literally the very first drive, we'll say, they go for it on 4th down. I don't know if you realize that.
Yeah.
On the very first set of downs, they went for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's clear that they're not comfortable with the ball in Mahomes' hand. But that being said, the longer this game lasts, it plays to our disadvantage if I'm the coach of the Bills. I know we can't stop Mahomes. So let's get points on the board because tying, it was not going to help us because it's a 100% chance he's going to score. It's not a 100% chance that we score. Now, what does that say about the coach's faith in Josh Allen? Who knows? But they were going for it on everything, which said to me, he's not comfortable with the defense, and he's not comfortable with this being a game of quarterbacks. He wants to put this game away. That was a very aggressive throw by Josh Allen. Maybe Diggs was intended to be that receiver, which I guess we'll never know. But I do believe that, let's say they kick the field goal and make it, it doesn't play into their favor. Because like you said, Mahomes gets the ball back, even if there's 30 seconds. He's got one of the best tight ends in the game, one of the best running backs in the game. I mean, it was obvious they were marching down the field and getting it done. One thing that I seen, and I was actually explaining it to my girlfriend, was, she was asking me, well, why does it seem like Buffalo's on the field so long? Well, that's because it took them a lot of plays to get down there. A lot of breaks with, penalties and stuff that allowed them to advance, whereas the Chiefs felt like they didn't have the ball at all because as soon as they got it, they just marched straight down the field. So, I mean, whether it was 30 seconds or 50 seconds on the clock, Mahomes is a 2-time Super Bowl champ. Let's pay him the respect. Me and you both are not huge Mahomes fans, but the respect of his skill and his resume shows that it doesn't matter how much time is on the clock, he's still going to score. So, I mean, obviously you want him to have as much time to work with, but I don't think the field goal was the way to go here. And the play, like you said, you hit it right on the nail. Why were those niggas going for fake punts? But then on 4th and 5, they kick a field goal in the last, which would probably be the last possession of the game. Mm-hmm. It didn't make sense to me. Especially with the kicker almost missing point after attempts. I mean, that's the easiest go-ahead point ever. Now, I heard the commentator saying there was, opposing winds of, 15 miles per hour, which could affect kicks. But it looked like the Chiefs kicker was very comfortable. Now, he did get his kick blocked, but not necessarily the accuracy of his kicks. They were all straight down the middle. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it was very inconsistent play calling. I mean, I felt like he was very aggressive in the very beginning, and then at the end, he kind of, like you said, let his foot off the gas. They didn't go to the run game as much as I would like them to do
Mm-hmm.
because, as you know, mobile quarterbacks eat off of play action. You're not selling the play action if you don't run the ball. So, I mean, I think they should have ran the ball a little more, got some rotations in there, and a lot more QB sneaks. I mean, if he could take hits in the first quarter, the game on the line, he should really be able to take hits. So it was very interesting to see the play calling towards the end, and definitely it would be very interesting to see if that play was intended to go to Diggs, because as you know, these plays have intended receivers, and okay, this is supposed to be your first read. So who knows? Maybe Diggs was supposed to be that intended option, and so at that point, this falls on Josh Allen that he threw it to him. But I do believe, it looked like his first look was to go for the end zone. I don't know. When he dropped back, he kind of surveyed the field, but it looked like he already had an idea of where he was going. So, I mean, to me, that says, okay, this was intended to be like a scoring play. But that's just my take on it. How do you feel about Mahomes? I mean, he does it again, pulls it off. That makes him 3-0 with Josh Allen, correct?
Yep, 3-0 in the postseason. And, like you mentioned about Mahomes, we're not the biggest fans of Mahomes, me for my own personal reasons, being Super Bowl 54. But given that, and since what we've seen since Super Bowl 54, it's like you said, you have to give him his level of respect. And going back to Josh Allen's decision to throw the ball deep for a touchdown, if it was the read or if it wasn't the read, whatever the case may be, he saw an opportunity and he took it. I will not fault him for that. But I go back to time management, and I personally felt, as a Mahomes hater, I felt like if you score then and you give him 2 minutes, that is a level of disservice and disrespect to Mahomes, because now you're basically daring him to go on a game-winning drive, which we've seen him done. And I think ultimately that last quarter, because it was a great game. I thought, the back and forth, the lead changes, a lot of, near turnovers were occurring. You saw them fumbling the ball, recovering the ball on the very first drive. They had, fumbled the ball and batted out of bounds. Like, this was a game that was as competitive as it can be. But as I mentioned, that fourth quarter came down to experience. Andy Reid, Mahomes, Kelsey, they've been here before. They play like they've been here before. And now they're on, their way to a 6th straight AFC title game. I like the Bills. I'm a fan of Allen, and as I mentioned, I'm a fan of their coach, McDermott. But it comes down to experience. These guys, the Chiefs know what to expect. They know what it takes to win a title. They've done it twice. They've been to the Super Bowl 3 times. The Bills haven't done so since the early 90s, 1993, when they lost 4 straight. And it goes back to that culture. Andy Reid knows how to win. I'm not a fan of the Chiefs, but I can trust his coaching style and what he expects his team to execute. I think the Bills had an excellent opportunity. I feel like based off of their 3 games overall that they've played in the playoffs, this was that opportunity to finally get the monkey off their back and get rid of the Chiefs. Unfortunately for them, they weren't able to do so. They played into the Chiefs' hands, and the Chiefs emerged victorious, and now they will be traveling to Baltimore to face them in the AFC Championships. And I talk about, one of the best games of the weekend. I do believe the Bills and Chiefs had that. But I want to go over to the NFC, and I